Hello and welcome to MBTV. My name is Damon and I prefer ENTJ in the MBTI, which is the Myers-Briggs typology indicator. Today I'm going to share with you one of the cognitive functions, which is extroverted thinking. Although everyone can hope that they are well developed in the way they make decisions, most people have a clear preference in the way they come to those decisions. Those that prefer the thinking function, both the introverted attitude and the extroverted attitude, make decisions with impersonal, systems-oriented, non-human information. With overuse and excessive tendency of this function, they may even put human information into the categories, which may actually cause the observer to question the particular subject's morality. But that is an extreme case, and for most it's just a clear preference and not a detrimental one. Another word for thinking is logic, which is the term used by Socionics, and as of late I've been using it myself. The primary reason I've chosen this word over the former is because many people believe they prefer thinking simply because they prefer to actually think over feeling emotional. In other words, they're confounding thinking with introversion and feeling to make emotional decisions. Both of these obviously aren't correct and anywhere near accurate when you actually understand typology. The thinking function is actually a process we use to come to decisions and closure. In contrast to feeling, thinking is not concerned with conveying feelings, expressions, and moods. Instead, it is concerned with the consistency of objects, things, and actions. In other words, what is correct and actually what is not correct. The function of thinking can adopt one of two attitudes, one which is pressed into consciousness and the other one which is less preferred, to the point of moving it into the unconscious. These attitudes are of introverted or extroverted nature. Further clarifying on the extroverted nature of thinking, which is often called practical logic, we begin with the notion that it is outside of the subject, which means it takes a priority of logic being externally consistent, sometimes at the cost of logic being internally consistent. What may make perfect sense in the mind may not actually work in external reality. So in a sense, we can call introverted logic proofed logic and extroverted logic practical logic. Extroverted thinking, also known as TE, uses its process to determine how well an object, thing, or system is performing, the side effects of that performance, and the observable result it attains. It measures this up against external standards and rules that are often easily observable by others. So it is likely to take a strong position in an argument or discussion using objective measurements to further validate the point, even shortcutting theoretical models. In addition, it is responsible for ordering things in an empirical process to make the most efficient use of the resources available while accomplishing the intended result. Where the introverted thinking function is focused on precision, classification, and criteria, the extroverted thinking function is geared toward execution and performance. To draw an example of this, the extroverted thinker may not actually think out all steps involved in a particular task. They tend to believe it is common sense, as it comes entirely natural to the person who prefers that extroverted thinking. The introverted thinker may spend a considerable amount of time making sure that each step is consistent with the previous one and that it all fits together to form a perfect whole. I prefer to avoid the term effective or efficient for either introverted or extroverted thinking in the general sense. Specifically, extroverted thinking is more effective and efficient in achieving a specific result, while introverted thinking is more effective and efficient in making absolutely sure that each particular step in the process is completely free of flaws, shortcomings, and potential inconsistencies. They may struggle selecting the exact steps in the process, but you can believe that they definitely will make sure that each step is identified and it's proofed 100 times over again. On the other hand, TE or extroverted thinking often leaves a mess for the introverted thinker to clean up while accomplishing its intended result. Where introverted thinking actually may struggle is even with their seemingly perfect models, those models may fall short when confronted with ever-changing external variables that may completely destabilize those models. In my experience, the combination of both introverted thinking and extroverted thinking is a very powerful combination in the business world. People who prefer extroverted thinking prefer to take in factual information outside of themselves to analyze the rationality or functionality of external actions, events, objects, and occasionally people. In order to determine the effectiveness of these particular things, they weigh them against a set of performance standards or rules, and that is usually what the object was intended to do in the first place. Although this can be true for both people who prefer introverted thinking and extroverted thinking, it is especially true with people who prefer the extroverted thinking. It is the natural tendency of those people to evaluate people and things using that exact same criteria, likely to omit taking note of the damage it may cause in their personal and professional relationships. Extroverted thinking may deem something completely worthless if it does not fulfill its intended purpose, instead of finding rather intrinsic qualities of that particular thing. In other words, to put this into a human perspective, the person who prefers TE that possesses an underdeveloped and underutilized feeling function may actually recognize that a particular employee is underperforming in their particular business. Instead of seeing the human potential and criteria such as stress at home, lack of sleep, lack of culture, lack of motivation, burnout, and other human causes, they may simply rule out this person due to their worthlessness. You may see them then saying something along the very lines of, "You're completely worthless," or "That person is completely useless," often not considering that they aren't the best fit position, or they're not in the best fit position, and there could be a position in which they could actually be much more happy. So looking at those human elements are often omitted by the person who does prefer thinking. In ENTJs and ESTJs, the extroverted thinking function is demonstrated by the incessant hunger to absorb large amounts of impersonal information as it relates to their professional or personal goals. They prefer to be very well informed and tend to not want to rely on their perceiving functions during a conversation. For this reason, they generally have an agenda set in the back of their mind, which is similar to the INTJ or the ISTJ, but there is a stark contrast between them. These two, the INTJ and ISTJ, may want to actually take in more information before making such a swift, logical judgment, and for good reason, as the ETJs are often seen as arrogant because they form judgments rather quickly. However, it's not because they want to be rude or they desire to be rude. It is simply because they want to keep things moving along. And if they slow down, the entire machine or process stops, and to them, that's a complete nightmare. So above all things, the ETJs have a strong inclination to be proactive, making the external world more consistent. This is because they're attached to the outer world more than the inner world. This is where their ego rests. So they tend to attach their self-worth to being involved in productive activities that result in and generate some type of action toward their goals, increase their knowledge base, or give them some kind of feeling of completion. A sure tell sign is them using the idea of borrowed ideas and objective facts that they may have actually heard somewhere else without doing much investigation. They follow a logical sequence, and these particular types, if they see that the objective facts don't align or follow a particular sequence, they will quickly call attention to the inconsistency. They particularly rely on these facts that are outside of themselves much more than their own thinking. The results of their thinking can only be tested in the real world, and if it doesn't actually measure up, then it's quickly to be discarded. The practicality of extroverted thinking, or TE, is nowhere near rivaled by any other cognitive function. But where it falls short is its lack of insight into identifying why a certain result is even necessary. Introverted thinking, in contrast, is much more questioning of the everyday generalities that extroverted thinking might take for granted. It is a common mistake to associate extroverted thinking with sociability, especially when paired with introverted intuition. Extroverted thinking, by nature, is primarily concerned with moving an agenda forward, and in most cultures, pressing some kind of conversation to a point and judging incoming personal data as inefficient or pointing out logical inconsistencies is not particularly social or even appreciated. Although people who do prefer extroverted thinking naturally enjoy conversation, they may not actually be very good at it, naturally of course. But in addition, some of these people may feel that these individuals are using them as a means to their own ends, so people can feel used by these extroverted thinkers. For this reason, it is important for them to utilize their feeling function to begin to make more balanced decisions and to consider the person's perspective. Well, the person they're speaking with anyway. So, in those who have tertiary or inferior FI, the logical order of the environment takes precedent over the internal harmony. However, this function plays a very particular and important role in the decision-making process of those who actually prefer extroverted thinking. The introverted feeling function, in particular, provides the reason why things must be structured in the outer world. Ultimately, this rather unconscious function will provide a sense of depth to the decisions that the subject makes, granting an often permanent insight into their inner ideals. This occasional depth of insight can provide a very soft, sentimental feel that will bring further clarification on their actions in the real world. When introverted feeling begins to arise in awareness, the subject will begin making more effective decisions by aligning their actions with what they believe is very important to them and those they care about. All right, there you have it. That's extroverted thinking in a nutshell. Of course, it's encased in archetypes and it appears differently in everybody because we are unique individuals. However, that being said, I hope that summarizes for you and it gives you a good aspect of how extroverted thinking works in general. That being said, thank you for taking the time to watch this content, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure to click the subscribe button as we continue to release more in-depth videos that are going to dive deeper into the functions, and we're going to get deeper into type dynamics and how these functions interplay with each other. So I appreciate you guys' time. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
It's kind of with a lot of people talking. I'm going to try to moderate it, but ultimately it's kind of an open discussion. I'm going to start with Jonathan to kick it off and his experience with INFJs as an INFJ, and then his relationship with INTJs and the differences he's seen in there, and anybody can contribute at any time. So Jonathan, would you go ahead and tell us kind of the difference between the two in your opinion?
Yes, as best as I can. I usually have a group of friends who they're a mix of